That's that. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. It is Thursday, December the 14th, exactly 9:15 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. Used to be some downtime or slower times during bowl prep, but plenty of stuff going on, and it's kind of just the nature of the college athletics landscape right now. We have things micro and macro, and they kind of intertwine. So we're going to get to a lot of that stuff. Offensive coordinator job has been posted. So if you're interested in applying, if you feel like you're qualified, I am not qualified. I do not have enough experience in that area. So I will not be applying for the job, but it's all right. I'm going to start here. And I'm not trying to offend anybody or call anybody's sources into question. But if Scott Frost is named the offensive coordinator at Iowa, Scott, I will eat this pinstripe bowl hat.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up with some Duke's Mayo while we're at it, and we can share. It's not going to happen. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I thought I saw it on the Pat McAfee show or something like that. I don't know where that came from. That's not the case. It's not that's not a fit for a lot of reasons. Not saying that Scott can't coach offense. He seemed to do pretty well when he was at Oregon, less well, if that's a phrase, grammatically, for how he performed at Nebraska, but I just do not see that one being the case. Now, there are others who are out there, others who are qualified.
They can bring Scott in, and his Scott Frost, his responsibility is to make sure there's no clapping going on during the play. We can't have any clapping because it's a distraction.
Yes. Well, I would, for his introduction, I would want to bring in Keith Duncan and blow him a kiss. That would be funny. But
I think the important thing here, Scott, is for people to use common sense. And granted, not everybody knows the dynamics and the interactions that go on between coaches and how they feel about each other. And some of it kind of leaks out, but Scott Frost is a square peg in a round hole, or whatever that saying is here at Iowa. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It would not work with him, the dynamics of him and Kirk Ferentz. I just don't see in play. I don't see his style of offense. I don't see maybe his personality. It's not a fit. So it's almost worth it's not worth spending any more of our time to talk about it. There are other candidates that I think are really attractive, and some that have worked for Iowa before. And I think that those are the ones that are probably worthy of discussion. And last night everybody got their flight awares out. And
oh no, we're doing that again. I didn't.
You didn't miss that.
I missed that. Yeah.
Okay, there was a private jet flying from first from Iowa City to Cedar Rapids, then from Cedar Rapids to Salt Lake City for Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator from Utah, who previously worked as the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin under Gary Anderson in 13 and 14. His son Joe played at Iowa from 2017 to 19 as a fullback, and then transferred with him. So adding A plus B equals, plus C equals F. I actually went there last night, and I didn't see Kirk Ferentz. So, those are the things that that some people want reported, that aren't reported. And I don't report a lot of that stuff just because it's like, okay, well, I just chalk it up to, okay, I didn't report it, and who knows, maybe he had a secret car waiting for him on the tarmac and took him away so he could avoid media, but I didn't see him there. And so I said, okay, that's not the case, and move on. But, the other ones we've talked about Paul Christ for a long time. Joe Philbin is another one that I've heard a lot about.
That's the name that comes up most often in my conversations, and it makes a lot of sense. And why don't you let folks know about Joe Philbin's background for those that may not know?
Yeah, I mean, we look at Joe and immediately people are going to think, oh, he's trying to get the gang back together again. But it's not about that at all. I mean, when you look at what he's done since Iowa, and granted, they have a close relationship. They work together for a long time, but he's also been a head coach in the NFL. He was, here's just some of his resume since he left Iowa. Let's just, he was OC for the Green Bay Packers from '07 to 2011. And in that case, people say, well, he didn't call the plays. That was Mike McCarthy. Well, he was involved in putting it all together and making suggestions. Then he was head coach of the Miami Dolphins from 2012 to 2015. Then he was assistant head coach for the Colts after he got fired from the Dolphins. Then he came back and he was OC again in Green Bay and interim head coach in Green Bay. And then, he was O-line coach with Dallas. And this year he spent as an offensive analyst for The Ohio State University. So, and some people are saying, well, he didn't call the plays, and that's the most important thing. That's laughable. I mean, come on. Calling the plays, he's probably be up in the booth. He'll be able to figure it all out. It's the scheme and the plan and the play design. He's got more than enough background for everybody in Eastern Iowa combined. And so, and to top it off, his real career started basically after he went from being OC at Harvard to being O-line coach at Iowa. So he understands the Iowa way. So I think you can't get a much better fit than Joe Philbin, if that's what you want to get if you're Kirk Ferentz.
It's a heck of a resume, Scott. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody with a deeper, more expansive resume than that. And like you said, with an understanding of how the Iowa program runs and how Kirk Ferentz wants the Iowa program to run. I mean, you would think it would be, nothing is completely seamless, but I mean, it would be, you would start ahead of where you would start with most hires, just in terms of just the lay of the land and all that stuff and just getting acclimated and all that. So it makes a whole lot of sense. We're not saying he is the guy. His name is obviously out there. I think it makes sense that he's a candidate. The job was just posted. So yeah. I think, does it have to be up for 14 days? Is that right?
Yeah, it can't be officially hired until after that. So
that puts us at what? A little after Christmas?
I guess, the 27th. Yeah, the day after they leave to go to Orlando is when it can be officially hired at that point. So, that part of it, the bureaucracy or whatever you want to call it, that's preventing a hire or an official hire. I mean, I don't know how, if this is who he wants, he's going to get who he wants, as long as their names aren't the same as his last name, as long he'll be fine, pretty much hire whoever. But for those of you that would be worried that he hasn't called plays, I laugh at that. I mean, his resume it speaks for itself. It's not like he's going to go into some sort of panic mode, because he did call plays at times. And he was involved heavy in the NFL. I mean, as an offensive coordinator for a long, long time. And let's face it, even if he called some of those plays, you don't think Aaron Rodgers changed some of those plays? Or Brett Favre, even going way back then? Brett Favre was the no. Oh, yes, good. Quarterback, and Aaron Rodgers could throw it, he could Porton torpedoes,
He was the offense. He was the offensive coordinator. Right. He is the offensive coordinator when he plays.
Yeah. So I think, any kind of detriment to him, and it's not bringing back the old band, like, it's not like, okay, and then we're going to bring back Ken again. And, it's not like that at all. I mean, it's basically, he's going to come back and, I'll be interested to see if there are any other changes that go along in concert with that. Because, he probably would want somebody comfortable as, whether it's a receivers coach or whatever. And I mean, I would think that Iowa has a tremendous running backs coach. I think he's on a high trajectory. in the future of this field. But it'll be fascinating.
My question with him, Scott, is, and we talked about Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, and he's been around some great quarterbacks, would be his ability to coach quarterbacks. And do you need to have somebody with him? Because that is the position I think that most needs to be figured out on offense, and developing quarterbacks, I think, is something with this hire, whether it's the coordinator or somebody with him, that needs to be figured out.
Yeah. Well, we could honestly say that his time in Miami was spent without a quarterback. That's pretty much been true of the Dolphins from about Marino to Tua, that they had a 20-year gap of any kind of semblance of quarterback play. Whether it was his fault or not, it was. But I think that's always a big question. I mean, he's going to coach quarterbacks? He's going to coach another position, but which one? I mean,
offensive line's his background.
Yeah,
his initial background, although he's expanded beyond that, but he has some experience there.
Right. And that seems to me, I remember asking Kirk back in 2017 when he hired Brian. I asked him specifically, is Brian also going to continue to coach O-line? And he's like, no, that's not part of it, because I think he wants somebody dedicated to O-line. He believes in it, and that's fair. That's understandable. And so I would not anticipate that being the case.
I'm sorry, but with him on the staff, Kirk, and he spends time with the offensive line, I almost think if you were to, just from a building of a staff standpoint, have Kirk, just say it is Joe Philbin for the sake of argument, have him and Kirk coach the offensive line, and then bring a quarterback coach in.
But then it's formulate the game plan, and you want somebody also in the offensive line room coaching them on the finer fundamentals. I mean, I think at practice, absolutely, you can do that, and you can, but I think it's just be in the trenches. Now, if you wanted to have a grad assistant do it, but still, it's just such a big and important area that I don't know that it works.
Yeah, you make a good point. Logistically, it probably, I was thinking more on the field practice than some of the development part in rooms and film and all that other stuff.
I think what would be interesting is when you have tight ends make the most sense to me, because I think because it's an important position, don't get me wrong, but it's narrow enough to where you're not going to feel like, you need somebody there. So, could he coach that or wide receivers? That would be another one, and bring in a quarterbacks coach, or maybe retain John Budmeyer if that's what's the role you want for him or not. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of questions and there are no answers. And so we're blessed with pure speculation and innuendo and rumor. And that's always difficult when my phone's blowing up. Hey, I heard this. Hey, I heard this. I'm trying here, and I'm not going to get into this rumor mongering business right now.
No, and I would caution people to not get caught up in that as well. I know it's fun and it's entertaining and it keeps you from having to do your work at the office. But think about it from a logistical standpoint. Think about it from what Kirk's role is and what we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast about his beliefs and his philosophy and his involvement in the offense, and think about a candidate and how that candidate might fit with that. Whether it be the style of offense, personalities, history, all of those things. Take all of that stuff into account and then say to yourself, does this make sense logically?
Yeah.
And then you may have an answer. But we probably and definitely won't have an answer probably until after the first of the year. So, Scott, we get over 2 weeks of almost 3 weeks of this. So everybody kind of just, be nice to each other and know that Kirk is not sharing his thoughts and this process with reporters and other people in this business. You may hear little snippets here and there, but for the most part, he's doing this out of the public eye.
Yeah, I know. It was funny. I mean, I laughed to myself while I was waiting on that airplane last night. And wasting my time there. And I'm like, what's Kirk going to tell me? Is Kirk going to say, you got me, Scott, I'm going to hire Andy Ludwig, I mean, good going on you to be here for this. No, he's not going to say anything. So, it's
And they're aware of all the shit that's going on out here.
Yeah, they are.
They know people are using Flight Tracker. They know people. They know what people are talking about on the outside and are probably laughing about it in the building.
For sure. Absolutely, for sure. And when they see names like Scott Frost out there, they're like, they're like, probably have like a bingo sheet. It's like
Kirk spits out his coffee.
Yeah, he's like, has a big snort. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, some of it. I guess in one respect, treat it as fun and games because it is. It's sport, and we're talking about it. Let's not treat it too seriously. But you also have to live in reality. We're talking about Iowa. We're talking about under Kirk Ferentz. Now, if Kirk Ferentz was retiring, and this was for head coach, then speculate away.
Yep.
And I can only imagine how difficult that's going to be, especially with, again, the bureaucracy known as the University of Iowa. And let's get a committee together, and then we'll have a committee to judge that committee, make sure it's doing the right,
And then we'll have a review board to review with the committee.
Yeah. And then we'll ask, our favorite state senator from Des Moines, how does this meet your requirement, Claire? So anyway, that. That day when it comes will be very, very. Those days will be very, very hectic, no question. But I think overall that, what are the things that Kirk likes? I mean, he's going to first of all, the person's going to have to fit with him, staff wise, personality. They're going to have to fit. They're not just going to hire, hey, this guy over here because they finished 20th in offense in the country. I mean, it's going to be because they got to know him, they like him, they think he can work well with others, that sort of thing. And then how does his offense work with what we want, the foundation of how we want to present this game plan? And that's why when you say, Joe Philbin understands it because he was part of it. He was part of the growth. He went from 0-8 to 8-0, and he's been a part of, NFL champions. I mean, Green Bay won the Super Bowl with him, and he's been an OC multiple times for Hall of Fame quarterbacks. So he fits. Paul Christ, has coached against Kirk 8 times, 7 at Wisconsin, recruited this area, understands how to play winning football with the players that Iowa wants to play with and the styles Iowa wants to play and design. So how does he mesh? There's a lot of, he had a lot of success. People have chided him for his offense late in his career. I mean, but when they had Jonathan Taylor, they were pretty freaking good. The eye test tells me they had pretty good players. Maybe statistically they weren't up there, but they won games and they won in dominant fashion. And as we know, Kirk doesn't give a shit about where they rank total offense. So those to me make the most sense. 30-year-old so-and-so from the Sun Belt who had a great offense isn't going to work at Iowa under Kirk Ferentz. So
and Ludwig makes sense too.
Yeah,
if you watch Utah, that makes a ton of sense.
Oh yeah, because Utah and Iowa are kind of spitting cousins, just different parts of the world. And as I said, he was under Gary Anderson at Wisconsin, coached there, coached quarterbacks, but he's very, very good at what he does, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get him. He makes more than Phil does. Yep. So, and let's I had that little bit of a discussion yesterday about adding hockey that, your choices could be, you can add hockey, but you're going to have to pay Phil and you're going to have to pay your OC. And, they could total in the neighborhood of $3.5 to $4 million next year. And they should, because football's football, and I know, we had this discussion. I'm sorry, I'm rambling here a lot, but
no, go. That's what this is the rambling podcast. Okay. We have no constraints here.
The rambling man, Allman Brothers.
I listened to that the other day when I was writing.
Yeah, love it. But like the state senator Claire Salcy or whatever, talking about Lisa Bluter and how she needs to be paid more. I mean, that's again, those are two separate arguments. Football, you've got to do whatever it takes to be successful, because football, is directly responsible for close to $90 million of your campus money for your athletic department. And then indirectly another 40 or 45. So, basketball, you can have that discussion, but football is everything. Pay it, make it. And there's a huge difference between going 8-4 and 10-2, so.
Yeah. And the coaches make enough money. Give the players more money. The players deserve a bigger part of the pie. That's my soapbox that I stand on. And we're seeing a lot more of that, and we're hearing a lot more of that. Where do we want to go with this? I think in connection with that, Scott, I think some of the hand-wringing that's going on with the offensive coordinator position relates to recruiting and the transfer portal. And if I was losing ground on that, I get that question weekly on the Mailbag podcast. Are they missing out on a chance to recruit? Obviously, they could use an influx on that side of the ball. What say you?
I don't know. I mean, but you look at the chart, the scholarship chart. I mean, once they bring in punter from Australia, they're at 85 scholarships. And you've got 8 to 9 other players that are 6-year candidates. And then you want to bring in more from you're only allowed 85. And so you're going to have to start trimming. Now, Cooper DeJean takes off. Okay. If
so he's not included in the 8 or 9 decisions.
No,
you didn't include him. Okay,
no, yeah. I mean, here I can kind of go through.
Yeah, let's do this. And for people that want to read about it more in depth, check it out. The article that Scott wrote on The Athletic. It gives you a breakdown of where they are scholarship wise and what type of limited flexibility there is, at least right now, until decisions are made with the guys that can either go or come back.
Yeah, because there are 9 guys in that extra year category is what I'm calling them, guys that have graduated, and this does not count Luke Lachey, and it doesn't count Cooper DeJean, because they don't have to do anything and just not declare, and they'll be there. But the extra year category, there are 3 defensive backs, Castro, Schulte, and Harris. And at linebacker, you've got Higgins, Fisher, and the potential for Nick Jackson if he obtains a waiver for his last year at Virginia. And then on offense, you've got Dejon Parker, you've got Nick DeYoung, and you got Eric All. And, I'll go out on a limb and say not all of them are coming back.
And Logan Lee is already gone for those.
Yeah, I don't even. Yeah, Logan Lee. There are some guys you just, he's one. Torrey Taylor. Yeah. They've already announced they're leaving, and then there are others that, it's probably, we're not going to list them. But so you look at this and you go, okay, which ones make the most sense, and then they got to go with Sophie's choice here, which is. Their Australian punter is going to enroll. I don't know his name, but it's going to enroll for the spring semester. So then you're going to have to start to look at how do they peel back just to get some of those guys on the boat or on board. And so I'm looking at, hate to say it, some sophomores that, third year guys that have been injured a lot. Do any of them go medical? Then you start to go with, and anybody else that's so far behind on the depth chart that you're going, I don't see your path here to the playing field. I'm letting you know the scholarship's here for you, but if you want to play, you may want to evaluate your options. So they're going to have those tough conversations. Then among those 9 players are, you got to prioritize them. I mean, let's face it, if Jay Higgins, Jamari Harris, and Sebastian Castro all say they want to come back, they're coming back. I mean, you'll move somebody. And then, if Eric All does, well, then if Luke Lachey goes pro, then I think you let him back too. But, some of the others, maybe it's, we'll do what we can, but I don't think we can get you on here. Maybe bump you up NIL wise, but take you off scholarship or something. I don't know. I mean, so am I being fair here, Rob? I mean, are those tough?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we are now. Luckily, I don't want to say luckily, but yeah, luckily where there's not another pandemic, and this is this grandfathering of this extra year. We're getting to the end of that now, and the puzzle will be easier to put together in the future. But you make a good point. If I'm a fan or somebody that's maybe casually looking at this, and is a sports fan, look at it like free agency in a way that, okay, who are our top free agents that we want to retain? Jay Higgins, Skip Castro, they're at the top of my list.
Mhm.
If Nick Jackson can come back, Jamari Harris, Quinn Schulte, those guys are all in the conversation, but then you have to prioritize them. What do we have behind said player on our roster? Is there somebody in the portal we can get if this person goes? These are all part of this puzzle right now that's very complicated because time does not stand still. We're constantly moving here. There are other schools that are interested in the same players you're interested in. You're bringing in a freshman class and telling them, you're coming in, you can compete. Some of these guys, I mean, they have a lot of in-state guys on defense that they're bringing in here. I don't know if they'll be ready to play when they first get here, but there's a chance. You never know. Those are all the evaluations and determinations that you have to make now. And then, like Scott said, there's the NIL. How much can you spend on retaining a guy? What's he worth to retain? Is he worth more than somebody you can get in the portal? All of those things come into play here.
No kidding. And here's also the reality, Rob, and this is it would have been really unseemly back in the day, but now it's a little bit more palatable, and that is with the players having more power, and now with the court case allowing them to have unlimited transfer. Maybe that does impact somebody or a couple of somebodies who came here earlier. Excuse me. But with that, with the ability to transfer and play right away, now coaches have the ability to be a little bit stronger, because if you can leave at any time, then we can replace you at any time. Now Kirk is, and the Iowa staff is pretty stand up, but there have been times where they've left guys out to basically shove out the scholarship. You can tell, things like you're not on our 105 and,
right.
Things like that. Or now that's even bulked up, but you have to have those legitimate conversations, and because roster management is vital. And if you've been, dare I say, you're entering or leaving your third year and you haven't cracked the depth chart and you've been injured and people have passed you up that are younger than you, then you've got to evaluate your own, steps here. Do I want to play here? Do I feel like I still have a chance to play here? Maybe I'm just, and some people like Logan Lee had bad luck and then they became hell of a, player for you. Other people just didn't quite do it. And so I think this is where, you do have to start looking at those. And there might be a couple of guys that say, you know what, we're just not seeing it. We're going to medical redshirt you, just not, and then give that scholarship to somebody else. And then, and they don't have to be under until they get to fall camp anyway.
Right.
So, you've got post bowl for somebody to make a decision. You've got post spring. You've got the summer. You've got all those times to make it a situation where it's more organic than a force out now. But when you start dealing with, again, the portal and portal needs and this roster management's all tied to the portal too, because if you lose Luke Lachey to the NFL and Eric Gall says he doesn't want to come back, you might want to go out and get a tight end. If you lose Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, but both of them, you might want to consider getting another linebacker. Maybe you have faith that your younger ones, one of them will step up, but all of them, that's hard. You lose Jamari Harris, you may want to get and Cooper DeJean goes to the NFL. You may want to go out and get a corner. Probably need a wide receiver anyway. So there's at least one. So
yeah, and it's also, like Scott was saying, it's a fluid process here because this, there's a guy, I'm not going to name names, but there could be somebody right now that's unsure of maybe where he stands. And maybe the coaches are too. They're like, we need to see you in spring to see how much progress you've made. And then at the end of spring, If it doesn't look like there's a path for you, then maybe it's time and we can help you. And I think that's the important thing here, the honesty and transparency from the coaching staff and the players to say, hey, what's my pathway here? And you never know because injuries happen and then you get thrown in there. There's nothing, you can't account for that. But all things being equal beyond that, what is my pathway to playing time? And the coaches can be like, listen, we don't see it for you here, but we're going to help you find a landing spot, maybe at Northern Iowa or South Dakota, where Iowa has some former players that are assistants. You can make these connections and help each other out, and that's the way to handle it. It's not. This doesn't have to be cutthroat SEC. You're out of here. We're recruiting over top of you. Make it so you have you're building your reputation that if you go to Iowa, they're going to be fair with you. They're going to give you an opportunity to win a spot or get playing time. And if you can't do it, they're going to help you find a place where you can do that. And that's where you want to be on this landscape.
Yeah. And Iowa's always been very good at being real with their people, being real with the players, being real with, from the recruiting standpoint all the way down. I hear it all the time when I talk to defensive linemen or players in like Indiana or wherever Kelvin Bell is. He's real with you. He will tell you exactly what you want and don't want to hear, but they always appreciate that. And I think that's one thing that, it's a little more difficult for us and our professions and stuff. It's easy to get defensive. Players don't get defensive like that because they understand the work that it takes to be successful. They know the pain that they go through after game days and practices. And if they understand where they sit and how if they're fairly evaluated, they will accept that kind of critique and that criticism and know that their best interests are there. And excuse me. I mean, I think, that's probably the case for some of, again, we don't have to, I'm not going to mention their names because I just don't think that's fair, in the college sense. If we were talking about the NFL, yeah, hell yeah, I'd run it through.
And if people are interested, they can connect the dots. Just go to the Iowa roster, look at guys that maybe have been here 3-4 years that have not even played on special teams or, it looks like they don't have a path.
Yeah. And so then it's up to the staff to be fair, be real, but do exactly what you said, which is, we don't see the path to the playing field. Maybe, this is your wake up call to work harder, or maybe, hey, you've worked your ass off here and we really appreciate everything you've done. I wish it could work. And I just don't know that you can get to the playing field, or you've been injured so often that we don't really want you to risk your life, and when you're 50 years old, like us old dudes, that your back is so screwed up that you can't really sit up straight and stuff. So maybe we're going to put you on medical. And then, some players leave during the portal and what's a good thing, Rob, and we've been doing this a while, and, even the podcast part of it. And that is when you look at 2020, Iowa's still very, very low when it comes to transfer portal. I mean, they've got 5 guys in, only 4 scholarship guys in. That means that your players believe in your culture, that they don't feel trapped. They have the opportunity to leave. They don't leave, which is a good thing. Now, if you're playing 5-card stud, it's a great thing. If you're playing 5-card draw, you might wish you could have a little bit of flexibility, but that's still, I think right now that this is going to be really pivotal because there are a couple of players I think we could prioritize. I mean, if you're going to take any 2 that could come, you're only going to get 2 of the bunch that have the extra year. I'm taking Castro and Higgins for sure. Those 2, sign me up. And then probably for me, Harris would be 3rd because it's corner. And then, hope for a tight end to stick around. After that, it's kind of, you hope you have a spot for him because, I mean, Quinn Schulte's a 2-year starter. You'd like to have him back. But again, in priorities, kind of like NFL free agency, your cap space is up. In this case, it's your scholarship limit.
Yep. And again, what do you have behind said player? How comfortable do you feel if, Jamari Harris goes? How do you feel about what you have at corner? Do you again, do you need to go in the portal? Same with Quinn. Is there who's behind him? And, we haven't seen much at linebacker. We don't know.
Yeah.
But like Scott said earlier, nobody knows, nobody has a better idea of where they stand than the players do, because they go to practice and they can see, okay, this guy's better than me. These guys are better than me. Some guys are a little delusional, but for the most part, if you're grounded enough, you know where you stand and if you have a chance to play. So, and decisions that those are the people that, we'll see what type of decisions they make. But again, some of that may be we won't know until after spring.
Yeah.
Because they may not have gotten the reps this fall because of where they are. Maybe they move up some on the depth chart after whoever leaves. If Higgins leaves, if Jackson leaves, okay, now the linebackers that have kind of been behind them, they move up. What do you have? I mean, that roster management and evaluation is huge now.
Yeah. And I think you look at the number of players coming in that are signing next week. I mean, there'll be eventually 21 with the Australian punter. And when Iowa reevaluates the situation, the predicament that they're in, maybe they start to cut this back a little bit, or decide maybe in the summer. It depends on how many scholarships you project, and once we get rid of the extra year nonsense, that'll make it much easier. But like a year like this, it might have been behooved them to have 17 or 18 instead of 21. And so that's kind of,
I think Nebraska's up to 26 or 27.
Yeah. Well, they've lost a lot during the portal anyway.
We'll see where they are by the time we get to fall camp. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of juggling in Lincoln.
Yeah. Well, I was just going through portals numbers the other day, and there's still more to be out, but I think there might be a couple more just even the last day or two. But 186 players hit the portal from the Big Ten, and there were 19 that. This might have been 2 days ago, so it's old news, but 186 out of those 18 teams. So an average of 10 per school, but that's skewed. But when you have Michigan State with 28, and Indiana with 26, and Purdue with 21, and then you have Michigan with 2, Washington with 2, but they're in the playoff. So who would be an idiot unless you are really disenfranchised or really enchanted, I should say, with your team? Why would you leave a playoff team?
Yeah.
But come January after the playoff, you'll see that they'll have a lot of hacks, people leaving.
No doubt. And that thing is fluid. There are people going in the portal as we speak, and tough to keep up with that. And but as the conclusion of this story is, the Iowa's numbers are really tight right now, so it's limited in what it can do in the portal. So don't overly stress about there not being an offensive coordinator. Iowa is still in the portal. It's still looking at players. It's still recruiting the portal. It's just a matter of, the pool's going to be smaller because there just aren't as many available openings right now. But again, fluid, we'll see. And there's another portal period in May, at the end of spring, where Iowa can get players too. So don't get yourself too worked up.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, because again, in the spring is where you're going to see, those like third-year players. Some are going to rise, and some are just going to continue to plateau, and that's where they'll know where they stand. They have to, and where the offensive coordinator would really hurt this team would be if Cade McNamara wasn't coming back.
Yeah,
if you're looking at your current situation without Cade, then I think you probably go, oh, okay, you're not going to get a quarterback, and then that would. Now, that's not to say that Cade McNamara is going to, win a Big Ten title or anything next year, but it's just to say, at least they know what they've got, whether it's good or not. Well, the jury's out.
And that's also a position where they evaluate and say, do we need to add a body in the transfer portal? Not necessarily a starter, but somebody else to come in here. So all of those things on the table right now. Want to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. systems.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for the great work that they've done in the community for over half of a century and for their support of the podcast. We really appreciate it, as we do with the folks you'll hear from now. Scott and I will be back on the other side with some more Hawkeye talk. And we are back. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you, folks, for being in here and listening. Got some activity in the chat room. Want to hit that first. A name somebody threw out in here, Scott, is Clint Kubiak.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Somebody was asking if there's interest there. I don't know if there's any connections there or anything like that, but he certainly makes sense. Don't know if he'd be willing to leave the NFL for college. That's always the question. Does somebody want to go and recruit?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I don't know, and frankly, that's the kind of situation I don't see happening, because now, he comes from a great pedigree. Obviously, Gary Kubiak was a longtime offensive coordinator, multi-time head coach, and so he's been.
I was watching UNLV and Creighton last night, and Lon Kruger's kid coaches UNLV, and man, it freaked me out. It looks. Have you seen him? It looks just like a younger Lon.
Oh, crazy. Man. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. I tell you what, I've had a couple of these moments. Earlier this week, I went to Winfield Mount Union. I went to talk to Cam Buffington, and then we were talking about his family, and I covered both his mom and his dad. And they're younger than we are. And
I know.
His dad was at Winfield as a football player, and his mom was at Wapello as a softball player and a track athlete. And I'm like, man, I was at Muscatine when they were there. I'm just like, Jesus, I'm really getting old.
I know. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Clint Kubiak.
Clint Kubiak. I would just say that on paper, that sounds great. I think he'd be good. But I think, I don't know, maybe it's me and maybe I'm the one that's off, but I think you're probably looking at somebody who's probably more college-based, somebody who's, whether they've recruited, but somebody also who knows Kirk. I mean, that's kind of OC that we're talking about that wouldn't work with Kirk, which is, heavily detailed in the NFL game with ideas that probably maybe they translate, but maybe the nomenclature is and the verbiage is too deep and detailed for college students. And Kirk might be trying to slow things down, So not as much as I think he's got a great mind and perfect for the future of the sport, it just might not be with Iowa.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly a fit, but I'm not sure there's enough background there or enough of a connection. There's just, like Scott said, you're not sure how things would translate into the college game. And college game's a lot different with recruiting, man, and NIL and all this other stuff that's going on. And that reminds me, I didn't want to forget this during our, and this relates to both all sports at Iowa, but Iowa announced a hire of Scott Brinkman to help with NIL coordination, another arm of this for Iowa in terms of helping student athletes get NIL opportunities. Hopefully somebody takes advantage. As Scott has been promoting for Sebastian Castro playing the cash position, there's got to be some type of financial institute, a bank, something out there that can do that.
But he's the cash, he's the Castro. Take your cash to the bank. And he did against Iowa State.
Yep. Here's it won't let us make you money.
Yeah.
With Sebastian Castro.
Yeah, exactly. So, in fact, I remember I wore my cash shirt, which I got at the Music City Bowl last year at the Johnny Cash Bar and Grill. And I wore it to, I think, the kids' day because that day you're just wearing whatever you feel like because it's hot out. And Kirk asked me about it, and that's what I said was, I go, well, I'm promoting your cash defender. He needs to hook up with a lending institution, and he take your cash to the bank. And he's like, man, you should be doing this. That's kind of funny.
I want to ask you about Brinkman, but before I do that, I know a lot of in-state kids and a lot of attention last night. I was flipping around, watched Iowa Western play Eastern Mississippi. Congratulations to Scott Strohmeyer and that program, back-to-back junior college national championships. They're out in Council Bluffs, Iowa Western, for folks that don't know. A lot of names that I was watching, Humple went to Louis Central, won a state championship there for them. There's just a ton of guys I was watching that I remember playing high school football in Iowa. So really cool.
Yeah, it is. Last year it was great. Of course, last year there was a stronger connection, because Terry Thompson, who has hit the portal, was and playing. And Jackson Filer. I don't know. Did he commit by then, or was he still kind of a free agent?
I can't remember what his timing was on that.
But either way, we knew of him, Rodney Filer's kid, and he was such a great defender at that level. And both of them are now in the portal. And Scott Stroman.
Who else of it? Nick Easley was from there.
Yeah, and that was really good.
Weechin was Weechin there?
Yeah.
Yep. So Weechin was there. Program's been good to Iowa.
Yeah. And it's been it's a quality. Obviously, it's the best junior college football program in the country. I mean, it's indisputable now. I mean, and Davion Nixon was probably the best one that they got there. When they sent him there, and then we're able to keep him away from Alabama and bring him back, and first team All-American and Outland finalist. That's a pretty good player, defensive player of the year in the Big Ten. And Scott Stroman deserves a hell of a job. He has just done a hell of a job there. He deserves all the credit in the world.
Yeah, it didn't look like Buddy Stevens was having a good time. I don't think that's going on Last Chance. The Last Chance U.
No.
And I don't think they're going to have Iowa Western on Last Chance U. Not enough drama for that program. Too stable, too business-like.
Yeah.
Last Chance U.
Exactly. I mean, well, it's, hey, it's Iowa. They do well there. It's just.
Let's talk about Scott. Why am I forgetting his last name? Brinkman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of what his role is here, Scott, and how this is another, I guess, layer, another step on this Iowa being in the NIL market like everybody has to be. It just seems like a good addition here to help student athletes along the way.
Yeah, and it's a really important position, Rob. I mean, it's in collaboration with ASP, and he's going to be the general manager for NIL strategy and operations. And as we remember, Scott Brickman was pitching coach for Iowa, and then worked in the development office, and then went over to help start up the Swarm with Brad, and then now he's at kind of working inside. There's a lot of discussion about the next phase of what's going to happen with these athletes and NIL. And there's, Beth Getz discussed it a little bit last week and said that, some of it might be that schools purchase NIL rights from athletes. And if you think about it, anything outside of football, maybe men's basketball and elite level other sports, maybe you're a Spencer Lee or a Caitlin Clark, but everybody else isn't quite in that category. It might be the best way to go, is just to work through the school as opposed to working individually. And I think that's probably, the best route. And there seems to be a belief that most of this will end up going through the schools at some point. And that's probably when they start paying their athletes, then they can be the funnel. But either way, it's a world that's changed so quickly. It's hard to get a grasp on it.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what's the next court case that the NCAA gets its ass kicked in again. You feel like it's kind of an interesting it's interesting to view this to see where they go with this, because you talk about the schools controlling NIL, and basically that's paying players all the stuff that nobody wanted, a short time ago is now cutting. It seems like begrudgingly and slowly the member institutions are realizing this isn't going anywhere. How can we best control this so it's not the Wild West?
I think when it comes to collegiate sports and historians start to write, I think we'll look at Mark Emmert's tenure as kind of like James Buchanan as president of the United States, the one right before Abraham Lincoln when everybody seceded. It's just like, what did you do? Nothing. And then what ended up happening? Civil War. And that's and we're talking about that now with Mark Emmert. What did you do? Nothing. I sat on nothing. I fought for everything, for status quo, and you lost everything. And now you're trying to pick up the pieces and figure out where it's going to go. And some things, you throw your cliches out there, put the genie back in the bottle. It's not going to happen. People that complain about NIL now, and sometimes on message boards, I don't think they should be doing it. They got a scholarship. You know what? That's ancient history. Yeah. Get back in the past. Go dust off a library book. I think right now you where this all started and how it, what were the inflection points. I think we look back at King Coulter wanting to organize as a union, and they fought it vigorously. Now they would beg for that. Collective bargaining? Oh, yeah. Well, you should have done it 10 years ago. Yep. The funny stuff that, everybody's laughing at Shabazz Napier talking about going to bed hungry, but then it shined a spotlight on, really? You can't put cream cheese on a cracker because it's the second meal of the day and it's a violation, and you remember Jim Delaney, and we talked about this. By the way, Cooper DeJean and Tory Taylor are now unanimous consensus All-Americans.
Congratulations to those guys.
And but when you look at the Jim Delaney offering up full cost of attendance, remember how that was such a big deal, that these schools are like, oh, I don't know how the UNIs of the world are going to compete with Iowas. Here's a news flash. They're not. They never have, and they never will. I mean, their budget is a tenth of Iowa's, and how are they going to compete for players? They're not, because if you have a scholarship from Iowa and one from UNI, you're going to Iowa. I mean, 99 out of 100, easy, pick Iowa over Northern Iowa. It's not UNI's fault. They're a great program for what they are, but, so the competition that people think are just, it doesn't skew it, and it emboldens them, like the full cost of attendance. And, back then people were talking about how, Texas, the cost of attendance is going to be $5,500 a year, and Iowa might be 32.
I remember those conversations.
Yeah. I mean, people are so shallow to think that, yes, some kid is going to pick Texas or pick Iowa or Texas because of $2,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the worry that I have here, Scott, and I think Vanessa Miller had a story about UNI's financial struggles. It's, if we get to the point where it's, Power 5 or people, we see it with Oregon State and Washington State right now. They kind of got left out and to fight for their own. You think about the smaller schools, the FCSs, and some of the lower level FBS schools. Will they be able to survive this? With the Power 5s taking, these big TV, how much is there enough money to go around for everybody?
Football's the biggest one to question. Football is the one that, because, if they cut off football at Northern Iowa, they're probably okay. I mean, that's the truth of the smallest schools like that, because football, it costs more than any other sport, pretty much all other sports combined, and you don't make it because you don't have the TV, revenue. How do you get it? Well, they're going to have to decide for themselves. And I did see Vanessa's story, and I understand what the, faculty are thinking, but it's stupid to think we need to cut off athletics from your campus, because then you have no reason to get anywhere in the paper, or get it knowledge or whatever. I mean, their biggest moment, and what do people know about UNI? Ali Farouk Banesh. That's the first thing that comes to mind. It's not, well, they're a great teacher school in Northern Iowa.
Cedar Falls is a nice town.
It is. I like Cedar Falls,
I
but
do too.
it's not, for anybody outside of the creative corridor, as my former employer once called it. It's not it's just a place.
Talking about NIL and money, I'm segueing my ass off today. Caitlin Clark gets another deal from a major company. This week it's Gatorade. Her endorsement has been announced for that. So she has Gatorade and Nike and State Farm and who am I missing, Scott? Other big
Bose, I
companies.
think.
Yeah, she's got
Buick.
Hy-Vee.
Ivy, yeah, that's
Yeah,
the first big one.
So she's obviously like what you see what really the high end can be for a kid that is marketable, right? This isn't going to happen, a lot, but for her, she has a brand. She's helping Iowa's brand. It's great. This is a great setup. So why would she want to leave for the WNBA if she's got this great setup? A lot of the discussion that I hear is more Iowa fan, wishful thinking. What you want is her to come back and play another season. Why would she want to go to Indiana? I don't know. Indiana's pretty. Do they like basketball in Indiana? I think they like basketball in Indiana.
Yeah.
They have a good young nucleus, including Aaliyah Boston, who was in Iowa conversations not too long ago. And Caitlin Clark, as long as she's playing basketball somewhere, is going to make a lot of endorsement money. Right. And let's let her make this decision. Lisa Bluter on her Zoom yesterday said as much. It's her decision. She has to do what she feels most comfortable with. From my outside looking in, Scott, just my perspective of this, I think she needs a new challenge.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I've talked.
From a basketball standpoint.
From a basketball standpoint, when you look at, everybody here looks at it through Iowa black and gold colored glasses,
right? And
a lot of the people that have saying, well, nobody cares about the WNBA, and I had somebody tried to tell me that the competitive level was the same, and I'm like, are you kidding me? You have no idea what you're talking about, and that's kind of defeats the whole argument. I'm like, I can't argue with you with this because you don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, the WNBA is far, far superior. I mean, you're talking about a similar disparity between the WNBA and women's basketball as the NBA with college basketball.
I think it's greater because there are fewer teams.
Yeah.
So the WNBA has the best of the best. We saw it with, Monica Czinano look what she did in college basketball. There wasn't a spot for her. At least there hasn't been a spot for her in the WNBA. It is high level.
I mean, she scores 2,000 points at Iowa, and she was, a third-round draft pick and basically cut right away. It's taken Megan Gustafson a long time to really make a living in the WNBA. And Caitlin Clark will immediately be the first pick. I mean, if she says she's gone, they would probably draft her now, if they could. And, now what people are arguing about, and I think is legitimate discussion, is about platform and awareness and how she can use that and increase her brand. And, and I guess that's probably a discussion for handlers, for herself, for for the sport at large, the Nike, that type of thing, which is an extra year at Iowa. Would that increase her brand more than taking on this new challenge and then elevating the brand of the WNBA? Because then all eyes are on her. Caitlin Clark's first game. And it's not just the Des Moines Register writing about it. It's ESPN airing it live in prime time on maybe ABC. It's wherever she goes. It's Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston and the Indiana Fever. I mean, she has the potential, and I think legitimately, this isn't hyperbole, to elevate the WNBA to the level Michael Jordan did in the late 80s with the NBA. And that's a hell of a challenge. And it's not that they're going to make her a star. She's going to bring her star to the WNBA. And I think, Iowa fans may want her back, and I understand that, but she needs to play against people of her ability too.
What I know of Caitlin, I don't know her a great deal, but the times I've had to be around her and just observing, one of her greatest traits is her competitiveness and wanting. I think money is a part of this. The branding is a part of this, but Caitlin Clark is a basketball player. She wants to play basketball against the best basketball players. I think that's in the forefront of her mind. Of course, she's thinking about the brand and money and all that. It's going to be there whether she's back here. It's going to be there whether she's in the WNBA. Her brand is huge right now. How much bigger is it going to get from another year of college? It'll grow, but maybe now's the time to go and grow your brand in a city like Indianapolis, in a league that needs more stars like this that can raise it. Why wait a year when you can do it now? That would be my counter argument. I do understand what you're saying. I can't quantify how much she'll build her brand by coming back for another year of college, but I know her brand. I mean, we just talked about it. Gatorade, State Farm, go Nike, go down the list. She'll add more, but how much bigger? I mean, she's got big now.
Yeah. And it also has the potential to stagnate. It also has the potential. I mean, what if Iowa, and this could happen, gets eliminated in the Sweet 16 and she's not there for the Final Four and she's not putting up 40 on South Carolina and Louisville and teams like that, getting her way there, then, she does need that next step and to take it. And I think that's the thing with this right now is you're talking about major markets that she'd be a part of when she goes to play the New York Liberty or the LA Stars, the Chicago Sky and all that stuff. She brings her star, which means in those major metro areas. I mean, look at right now the crowds that go into Iowa games. You're selling out in Wisconsin, which averaged like 3,000 fans a night last year, and they've got 14,000 now. Northwestern, Rutgers has announced a sellout. I mean, Northwestern, when we were in Chicago, they would announce women's basketball tickets on sale, and that includes the Iowa game and things like that. Iowa State
too, right?
Yeah,
Minnesota's. Yep.
So everybody wants to see her. You think that's not going to happen at the next level too? I mean, and I've seen some, dare I say, some older guys, that have been like, well, I only watch them because she plays at Iowa. Who cares? Nobody cares about you. It's like Nike's campaign for the Air Monarchs. There isn't one.
Right.
They don't care about you as a consumer. And just like the WNBA doesn't care. Well, we lost that Iowa fan that tuned in 4 times last year when Caitlin Clark was playing. They care about the 11-year-old girl that's playing basketball that wants to buy the Air logos, which they should have came out with already, and wants to buy her jersey and go to these WNBA games and increase the brand of that league and turn it into something more viable. I mean, there's so much there, so much untapped potential. And in that, she'll draw some jealousy from some players, but she'll also unleash enough players, their recognition that everybody will benefit from it.
Not in a direct comparison, Scott, but you look what Tiger Woods did for golf, and there were a lot of jealousy for him, but he made a lot of people a lot of money.
Absolutely. He's been the face of it. You could still say he's the face of it. When he plays, TV ratings. Same thing with Caitlin Clark. I mean, and she's already helped the sport immensely, college basketball. So going to the next level. She wants to play in the Olympics. She wants to play at the WNBA level. She, her commercial, one of the best commercials I've ever seen was the Gatorade one, showing her as a little girl and what she's capable of doing. Being able to go to Kinnick Stadium and playing games and 10 million viewers. That's the Caitlin Clark effect.
And she'll help the Iowa brand when she's on the next stage of her career. she's always Caitlin Clark from Iowa. So
Yes.
as she gets when she leaves here, she's bringing Iowa with her.
Yes. And everywhere she goes, she'll talk about it because she is, the most recognizable face in the state, and rightly so.
All right. Our last topic for today, unless I missed something, is the struggles of the Iowa men's basketball team, Scott. We knew this was possible in terms of what Iowa has lost the last several years. I think it's more what it's not only the losses and the bad loss at Purdue, the bad loss at Iowa State, arguably the two toughest road environments they'll face this year, right up there.
Yeah.
Those are games where, you lose, but it was kind of the way they lost. And then coming back on Sunday and, having a decent first half, playing decent, and then just falling apart in the second half. And then going back to, we talked at the top of this podcast about Iowa's offensive struggles in football. You have an Iowa basketball team with a reputation for not playing sound defense, giving up 89 points a game this past week, roughly. Is that right?
Yeah, it is 87, 90, and 90.
Yeah. So those are those narratives and those, weaknesses that we've seen in the past. And when those come up again, it just kind of, the fire's already there and it just stokes it more. And I wrote this, I think it was after the Iowa State game, that this is kind of Iowa. There are a lot of things here, and I don't want to run us too long here. And I know you have thoughts on this too. They look disconnected. They look sideways. I'm using Fran terms here. They don't have connection on either end of the court. I'm not seeing on-court leadership. And maybe that's just a function of, another Fran word, of losses, right? Things look bad when you lose, but I think maybe there's a greater appreciation for what Connor McCaffrey brought to this program this year, Scott.
Probably a little bit, yeah. I mean, he brought a lot of. He's the glue piece, no question, because he was able to do so many different things. Toughness. There's nobody tougher than him, and that just doesn't mean go out and kick somebody's ass. It just means when you're on the court and doing the right thing and taking the fall if you need to and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, there's no leadership visibly to me. Nobody out there who's going to slap the floor and get the big steal, make the big play on offense, get the 3-point play and then come back and do it again. And when you're playing defense like this, which is not playing defense, it doesn't really matter anyway as far as what you do offensively. But they're number 2 in the Big Ten in offense, and they're number 14 again on defense. Like every year, they're in the top 2 or 3 on offense and last every year. And you look at the last 4 Power 5 programs they've faced. I mean, they've lost them by double figures. The last 3 games they've lost by double digits. That's the first time since the end of the 14 or not 19 season, I think it was.
It reminds me of the season before Luka got here.
Yeah, it's for sure the Bohannon and Cordell Pemsel and Cook's first year where things just kind of fell apart and to me, the Purdue game, hey, you're playing a team that's angry in a place you never win, and they've got the best player in the country, and they're going to kick your ass, and they did it. That one to me, I'm like, no brainer. I was surprised it came within 20. Iowa State, when we talked last week, Rob, I said it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about being competitive to me, which is if you're down 8, don't get down 12 or 14. It's about staying at 8, cutting it to 6, staying in fighting competitive range. And they did not do that at all. Iowa State did whatever the hell they wanted to them. They were better in every single facet of that game and intensity too. And then Michigan, the second half, it was the same deal. I mean, Michigan's not a good team. This is not a good Michigan team at all. And yet Michigan was able to do, I mean, they have more turmoil than Iowa does, with Juwan Howard and everything. And then the other part was Fran getting ejected was selfish. He was angry and got a T. I get that. Getting kicked out was selfish. It didn't do any good to anybody. It did no good to his team. It's a young team. It's an impressionable team. They need their coach in there to teach them how to fight, even if they're losing, even if they're down and they're going to lose. He needed to be there for that. This is the biggest game they've had at home. The only quality opponent they've had at home, and to get ejected, I thought was a really bad look for this team and that coach.
I was glad when he got ejected, it wasn't like he didn't lose it. He kind of was organizing things.
Yeah.
So that was a positive for me, that he was like, okay, I've gotten thrown out of this game. Now I have to figure out a way that this can be a positive for my team. And he was calming people down and talking to people on the bench about what needed to happen when he was gone. So that was a positive, but I agree with you. He's not doing any good in the locker room when you have a young team and you're trying to get things together. Maybe, and I will say, I know that statistically, offensively, they're scoring a lot of points, but they're not playing well on offense either. And I think that's leading to scramble situations on defense. And we've seen it and talked about on this podcast, Scott. That is not how this team is not a good defensive team anyway, but when you're scrambling, it's even worse. And then the other thing that's sticking out for me, excuse me, DeSante Bowen starts at point guard at Purdue. Josh Dix starts at point guard at Iowa State. Tony Perkins starts at point guard against Michigan. 1 week, 3 different starting point guards.
Yeah, and if you might as well throw in this week Brock Harding or something and put him there while you're at it. I mean, yeah, there's just really no consistency on offense, the connectedness that you said, they're sideways. Every single Fran cliche you can throw out there. They've really got, to me, they're players that could be leaders aren't really being leaders. And then the younger players, I think, are capable of it, but they're just not either consistent enough or they're freshmen. I like the way Ben Krikke plays, but he's still a transfer. I think he's a really good piece. I don't know if he's a great defensive player. I haven't really come to a conclusion on that. But, Peyton Sanford they're one of the better outside shooters in the country. When he's hitting. Yeah.
He's trying to lead. I watch him out there. He's trying. Yeah. But other players have to be receptive to his leadership too. And sometimes he gets a little off too if his shot's not falling. I think it's natural for a shooter, if your shot's not falling, to get a little bit down, and it's tough to pick other people up.
Yeah. And I think, Tony Perkins is a dog. I've always liked his style of play. He's tough. He's got all the characteristics you want, but I don't know that he's the lead. And you need a leader scorer too. You need somebody who can go get his bucket, go give the guy, his. And I don't know that that's his position. I think he's a better, second, third option in the backcourt as opposed to a number one. And Patrick is to me, very passive, athletic player that, I don't know that he wouldn't be better coming off the bench. I think he could be he can infect change coming off the bench probably better than he can as a starter. But, and then
he had some
guys,
minutes doing that last year when he came back from, his mental health break. He came off the bench, and I thought he had some good games though.
I think, we talked, I think, about Owen Freeman, whether or not he should be the starter or not.
I'll change my mind.
Okay.
He should start.
I would probably run, him and Krikke in the front court, Sanford, Perkins, in the back, and then I don't know who would you put on as a 5?
I don't know. I don't know. Last game they played Perkins at point. If you're going to do that, just go Perkins, Sanford, Patrick, Freeman, Krikke.
Yeah.
Just Michigan kicked your ass on the backboards. Their size killed you.
Yeah. Which I think is part of the reason why they had him anyway, Freeman, as in the starting lineup to begin with. But, I think, Dembele needs to have more minutes. He's a physical presence. You're getting into the Big Ten season. coming up. You're going to need some of that. And then, Brock Harding to me is like gain some on-court maturity. And because I think he's got a great game, and I think he's going to be your starter maybe next year. Maybe you should just go ahead and do it now, get him out there. But he's also kind of reckless and flashy and fun, but also you need to be a little more controlled. Unfortunately for Josh Dix, I think he had his opportunity maybe in Ames to be the starter, and it fell apart.
That's just a really tough spot to put somebody in for their first start.
Right. I'm sure he was nervous. He's an in-state guy, and you're in the most crazy environment that you're playing all year.
Yeah, no doubt. So, there's nothing you can do here. You can't, change the roster midseason. You just Fran's got to keep trying to push the right buttons here, play guys that have earned the playing time in practice, and just kind of work through this, Scott. There's really no other option. You have 3 non-conference games starting with Saturday in Des Moines against Florida A&M, and then you've got 2 more at home to end this month before going to Wisconsin on January 2nd for your next Big Ten game. You got to figure some things out here in these next 3 games, build some confidence, figure out rotations. And even then, the level of competition from what they'll face the rest of this month to getting back into Big Ten play. But there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to prepare yourself the best the rest of this month and work on the things you have to work on. And if guys aren't doing what you're asking them to do, put somebody else in.
Yeah. I think this is going to be a really grind. I mean, I don't want to get too negative on this because the season still hasn't really, we're only, a quarter to a third of the way through the season right now. But to see the way they've played and then to know what the Big Ten is. I don't think the Big Ten's a great league necessarily this year, but I think there are a lot of decent teams and decent teams that are better, that have played better than Iowa so far. So I would say that, Florida A&M and UMBC, try to do whatever you can to play well in these games and get some guys out there in confidence. As you said, go away for the holiday break and come back, play Northern, try to play well, because then you got to go to Wisconsin. They've been a good team this year. Now they got blasted by Arizona, but so just about everybody else in this country.
So it's good.
Yeah. I mean, Rutgers has it going. They're going to be here. Nebraska will be here, and they're playing well. They beat the hell out of Michigan State. Maybe you go to Minnesota and get a win, but then you got Purdue and Maryland back-to-back at home when the students are here, and then go to Michigan and Indiana. It doesn't get easy. And you look at this and you're like, eek, this could be a bad year. You just have to prepare yourself for it. And then we're going to have the big picture questions in your mailbag every single week, Rob, and on our tweet timeline every single day.
Yep, no doubt. It's interesting time just overall. You think about, Kirk getting towards the end of his career, the hiring of a new offensive coordinator there. Fran, this program, how does he feel about moving forward with what he has? How, Lisa and Tom have been here a long time. It's just eventually time catches up, right? And there are going to be changes, not immediate, but you start to think about those things now.
Yeah, you have to. And they still have an interim athletic director.
Yeah.
And they need to, now that search is underway. So that needs to be concluded fairly soon.
So if you don't feel like you're qualified to be the offensive coordinator, maybe you can be the athletic director.
I think there are a lot of fans who can do both and do it well.
Take on both roles. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you lose to Minnesota, you're fired. You're fired. I don't care.
Yeah. All right. We hit on everything, Scott?
Yeah, I think
we got everything for this week. Like I don't know if I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast, we'll have our Festivus show next Thursday. We'll talk. Signing day is a week from yesterday, so we'll be able to talk about that more next week and maybe have an idea just from a roster standpoint, have an update. That could be a weekly segment, Iowa football roster update and where we're at. But we'll be able to talk about that next week. As we move along here, we'll start to dig in a little bit more with the Citrus Bowl and get you guys a preview on that a little bit more. I haven't even started with that yet, but we'll as we
No.
move along here. So plenty of stuff to get into next week as well. But this one has run its course. We appreciate all of our sponsors. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Bye, Scott.